Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Yesterday, Droupadi Murmu, the two-time BJP MLA and the former governor of Jharkhand, was elected India's 15th president. Murmu, who won more than 64% votes, was the candidate of the National Democratic Alliance led by the BJP and was running against Yashwant Sinha, the opposition candidate. With this win, Murmu has become India's first tribal and the second woman president. Yesterday's celebrations were on all day across various parts of Odisha, which is Murmu's home state. Now, from the beginning, it was clear that the NDA had a clear advantage over the opposition as far as the numbers were concerned. But the NDA also had an upper hand when it came to establishing a strong narrative. Because while the BJP chose Murmu, a tribal woman candidate from Odisha, the opposition ended up choosing Sinha, an ex-BJP upper caste North Indian man. It was a decision that led many to say that Sinha's nomination was essentially a failure of imagination by the opposition. In this episode, we talk about what Murmu's win means for the BJP and the lessons it has for the opposition. But first we talk about Droupadi Murmu herself, who is 64 years old and was born into a Santhal family in Odisha. When we spoke to Indian Express's Abhishek Angad, who recently did a profile on her, he told us that she comes from a very humble background and that she was a trailblazer of sorts right from the beginning. For example, she was the first woman from her village to ever go to college.
So she was the first woman to go to graduation outside her, even the district. She is from Mayurbhanj district, which shares a border from with Jharkhand. But then at that point of time, it was Bihar. And she went to Bhubaneswar to study. And in those days, forget any tribal woman. In those days, any woman in particular, it was very hard to travel from one place to another without having anything on your phone. But those days, there was nothing, only a map. And from there, you used to decide where to go. And then she maneuvered through it, and then she decided that she has to go, and she went there and she studied.
After she completed college, Murmu began working as a clerk in the Odisha Secretariat and later married Shyam Charan Murmu, who had been a bank employee. But after marriage, Murmu wanted to do something more with her life.
She wanted to engage herself in some community work. So in a very small honorarium pay, she started teaching at one school. It was run by Aurobindo Trust, and the school was Aurobindo School. This is like early 90s. And she started teaching there, and she used to teach everything. She used to teach maths, she used to teach geography, Sanskrit, and everything. This is what a management person who saw Droupadi Murmu teaching there, this is what according to him.
She taught in the school for roughly 2 to 3 years. And during this time, people began to take note of her because of how sincere she was. And one of these people was the then BJP member Raj Kishore Das, who at that time was the chairman of the local area council.
He spotted her first, and since he had come from BJP, so he offered her the post of, will you fight for the municipal elections? And then initially what I got to know was she was not convinced because this Das had actually gone and sent someone else. Then he himself met her and told her that you'll be better able to serve the area and better able to take care of whatever you wish to do. You can do through politics.
He says that this was the first seed of politics that was sown in her mind. Incidentally, this was also the time when BJP was trying to make inroads in Odisha. Now, soon after this, in 1997, she contested and won her first municipal elections. This is how she came to join the BJP, a party she has continued to stay with. People who remember her from that time told Abhishek that when she won the municipal elections, she was put in charge of sanitation work, and she took the job very seriously.
Every day she was driven in Maruti 800 car which belonged to her husband, and then she used to go and stand by the edge of a colony where there were drains, and then every day from morning to evening she would be there at the site where the sanitation work was done.
This really impressed Raj Kishore Das, and so she was later given a ticket to fight as an MLA. And she won again. This time, she even became a cabinet minister and was given the portfolio of transport and commerce. This was in the 2000s. And then in 2004, she again won as an MLA. And this time, she held the portfolio of animal husbandry and fisheries. This was during the coalition between the Biju Janata Dal and the BJP. Though her winning streak came to an end in 2009, that was when both the parties broke ties and the votes did not go in Murmu's favor. And this was also a period during which she suffered a series of personal tragedies. Between 2009 and 2014, her eldest son, her youngest son, and her husband passed away.
So one of the reasons why they died was because of alcohol. What I was told by the very close people and who privy to everything who had gone to the hospital, they said that they had become alcoholic, and in 2009 she lost her second child and the eldest then, Yashwant Murmu, and he was riding a motorbike after getting drunk. Then in 2013, her younger son, Sipun Murmu, he was crossing the road when he was actually hit by a speeding vehicle. And then he died, and then she again went to a shock. And then there was a husband whose death was not very shocking, but it actually broke her. In the sense that her husband had liver cirrhosis and he was actually battling it for some time. And then he passed away in 2014.
Kishore Das told Abhishek that this was the period during which she cried incessantly and went through a very low phase. He said that this was the time she would also talk about how she had lost her 5-year-old daughter many years ago. This was a very tough time for Murmu, and she thought she would no longer be able to continue her political career. But people around her were supportive, and they urged her to stay on.
And that was the time when she actually joined this spiritual sect called Brahma Kumari. From 2014 to 2022 now, it's been 8 years. Every day she would do her meditation as per what has been told, guided by Brahma Kumaris, that particular sect.
Soon after this, senior BJP leaders made a decision to move Murmu out of Odisha. She was sent to the neighbouring state of Jharkhand and was made the governor. And it was during her tenure as the governor of Jharkhand that a major incident took place. The year was 2016. The chief minister of the state, Raghuvar Das, had passed some amendments to 2 land laws, the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act and the Santhal Paragana Tenancy Act. These amendments would have made sure that lands in the region could be easily transferred for industrial use. After these amendments were passed, all he needed to do was for Murmu to sign them as the governor and officially make them laws.
But what happened was there was a massive protest and outrage against this entire move, and there were a lot of around 200 delegations that met, tribal delegations from tribal communities met governor, and then she had actually studied it very deeply, the whole amendment. And according to a very solid source in the current government, who had also gone to meet her, actually she read it, the entire bill, and she had made 93 objections to whatever in the amendment it had said. And apparently this is a source-based attribution, and apparently she also had met the Prime Minister, had conveyed her feelings about why this bill shouldn't be signed by her.
This was a really big deal, but she took this step because these issues were very close to her heart. And many thought that this would end her political career. But her presidential nomination put an end to all those doubts. But it is also worth noting that despite this one instance where she disagreed with her party, she has largely stuck to the party line when it has come to bigger issues like farm laws, nationalism, the Hindi language, and even cow urine, that is, Gau Mutra.
Her stand with Hindi that everyone should know Hindi in India and everybody should respect Hindi as a language in India. So that is one thing which I think was completely resonated. And second was that she advocated for cow urine and the medical benefits of it. In one of the programs that she had gone in Ghatsila area near Jamshedpur, then she said that this particular place is known for this kind of medicine. And a lot of medicines are made from the Gaumutra and which is beneficial for the public.
Though the other thing to note is that Murmu has always led a simple life. something that many people told Abhishek.
There was no air around her or her family. What to, and a bureaucrat told me that, matlab in those days, what used to happen is if the governor, of course, if CM of that state is being driven in some particular car, the governor may also demand that, okay, I need to be driven in that particular car. But she had no such demands and all. Whatever arrangement, security that was given, it's there. So even when we go to her house in Mayurbhanj district, it's a very basic 2-story house. And when you go there, it's a very limited capacity of people that it can hold up. So this grocery shop owner, he told me, "आप घर देखिए, आपको लग रहा है ये गवर्नर का घर है." He made a very important point. But I'm saying if any MLA who wins an election, you see that their house is very beautifully made from outside, but she kept it very low profile. So there's this story that once aide de camp, who is basically from army, and he also travels with her. So he had gone to Rairanpur to her house, but then there was no space in that house. Then that particular collector had to actually make some space in the circuit house so that whenever they come, they can stay in the circuit house. So these are small anecdotes which will tell you about her simplicity.
Abhishek says that when he spoke to people in her hometown, they told him that she really deserves to be in this position. This is because they remember her sincerity and her hard work. And now that she has become the president, the nation's first citizen, and the supreme commander of India's armed forces, people from her community have a lot of expectations.
There's this restlessness that what will she do? Will she stand up? Will she stand up for certain issues? They're very anxiously waiting that what will she do in important matters? Will she hold some consultation before directly giving a assent on each and everything that the parliament passes? There is happiness, but then there are great expectations that is building around a lot of areas.
This is especially because Murmu has been outspoken about the issues related to the tribal community.
So A, her opinion about the tribal communities, B, what position she had in the BJP, and even then, she was not merely a rubber stamp. C, generally she's a very simple living, and 4, that she had given access to everyone, whoever were genuine concerns who were there and wanted to meet her. And last, that she actually visited all Kasturba Gandhi schools in Jharkhand. This is a residential school for economically weaker section of society, to see how the conditions are. And this Raj Bhavan staffer told me that he's never seen a governor who had gone and to sweat to walk to till that particular Kasturba Gandhi school. So all in all mixed together, there's a great happiness, but there is also great anxiety about how things can improve for the tribal community while she's at the helm. Because now they think is one of the golden time where most of the very important things can be pushed. So they are very anxiously waiting.
Now, the other thing to note about Murmu's nomination and win is that her name was actually first considered 5 years ago, when the tenure of President Pranab Mukherjee was about to end. Plus, Murmu was one of the top choices of Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well. When we spoke to Liz Mathew, who reports on the BJP for the paper, she told us that by nominating her, BJP not only wanted to make a statement, but it had specific electoral goals in mind.
See, BJP, in the last few years, whatever major and significant appointments it made, BJP wanted to prove a point which would have a kind of impact on its electoral test as well as its outreach programs and its expansion schemes. And Droupadi Murmu's election was significant in terms of, one, BJP's plans to go beyond its established and loyal support base. Droupadi Murmu has two uniqueness in terms of the candidature in comparison to others. One is that she is a woman and the other one is a tribal woman.
Liz says that women, because of BJP's welfare schemes, have already been gravitating towards the party. But Murmu's tribal identity is useful for the party because before 2024, elections are going to take place in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. And in these states, the support of the tribal community is crucial for the party. So she says with Murmu, BJP is trying to hit two birds with one stone, projecting itself as a pro-women and pro-backward community party.
So as we know, BJP's next election point will be against dynasty. BJP has been, the leadership has been talking about it. In the recent national executive meeting also, they kind of emphasized on that point. So for that also, the one point Prime Minister Narendra Modi keeps talking about is BJP is a party which promotes people on the merit, on how they work for the people and how they take up the challenges in the governance process, not promoting the families. By family parties, they mean right from Congress to regional parties like Samajwadi Party, DMK, and the Chandrasekhar Rao family in Telangana.
These are the parties and the regions that the BJP is looking to target. After establishing itself in central, northern and western India, it now wants to dominate the south and the east.
So for BJP and the leadership, this anti-dynasty stand and also this talking about family politics, and in comparison to BJP's pro-poor politics and where the poor people are getting empowered, party hope that will have some kind of traction in the coming election and in their efforts to expand their reach to the southern state as well as the other states where the party has not been able to make its mark.
And it's not just the BJP. Its ideological parent, the RSS, has also been working in tribal-dominated areas. Liz says that for a long time the organization has been targeting Christian missionaries, accusing them of converting tribal people, and with a number of initiatives has been looking to get tribal people back into the Hindu fold.
And now again, the RSS is also pitching in after BJP President JP Nadda has launched a massive outreach program for the tribal, and he has already visited Rajasthan twice, and Amit Shah has visited Madhya Pradesh in tribal areas announcing programs. Prime Minister Modi has announced grand plans and schemes for development projects for the tribal areas in Gujarat. That all happened. Along with that, RSS has also been pitching in.
For example, recently, an RSS-affiliated outfit called the Janjati Suraksha Manch launched extensive programs in the tribal areas of central Indian states like Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. All states which, like mentioned earlier, are going to polls soon.
The crux of the campaign would be the demand to remove tribals who have converted to Christianity or Islam from the ST list that indicts them to reservation. So their argument is that most of this ST status benefits are going to the people who community which have already been converted into other religions, and the Hindu tribals are not getting them. So they are planning big rallies and multiple rallies in Gujarat, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand this month. It is also reaching out to more than 3,000 electoral representatives, MPs, MLAs and MLCs across the state. So what happens is RSS lays the ground and BJP is hoping to that extra push that will convert the existing base and the whatever ground the RSS would gain into political gains. So Droupadi Murmu's elevation as the head of the state definitely is going to be a big help for BJP.
Now, after talking about Murmu and what her win means for the BJP, we now talk about the opposition. As mentioned in the beginning, the opposition was criticized for picking Yashwant Sinha as their presidential nominee, who ended up losing by a huge margin against Murmu. When we spoke to Indian Express's Manoj CG, he said that Sinha's pick should be seen in the larger context.
The BJP during the Vajpayee or the Advani era, we can call it the pre-Modi era, was often lampooned as a Brahman Baniya party and all. But post 2014, the party has significantly expanded electorally, as we have seen in Uttar Pradesh, the decimation of the BSP, the decimation of the Samajwadi Party, and in the entire Hindi heartland. It is no more an upper caste Hindu party. It has expanded. It has made inroads into all sections of the Hindu population. The Prime Minister himself is from an OBC community. And this is part of a larger social engineering message that the BJP wants to put across. So 5 years ago, they elevated Ramnath Kovind, a leader from the Dalit community, to the top post. It was a powerful political message. Now they have picked Droupadi Murmu, a woman tribal leader. So it is part of that larger, powerful political message that the BJP wants to give. Now, in that context, The consternation among, many of the opposition parties was that the opposition perhaps did not read the message that the BJP would be sending.
He says that in that sense, many of the opposition parties felt that they did not do their homework right. And this is why this issue even caused a rift within the opposition parties, where many of them ended up supporting Droupadi Murmu.
They approached Gopal Gandhi, they approached Sharad Pawar, they approached Farooq Abdullah. All of them turned down, and in the end, it was a name on which there was broad acceptance. So there was no story, there was no narrative behind the candidature of Yashwant Sinha, apart from the fact that a large number of opposition parties have found acceptance in his name, and he's a former BJP leader. So that was the only message in that sense. And that became visible when parties like the JMM from Jharkhand, which has a significant tribal population, a tribal party itself, they took time to decide. They finally decided in favor of, supporting the NDA candidate. Several other parties, the BSP, for instance, the JDS, the TDP, the Akali Dal, broadly, they are not part of this larger opposition grouping. They may not be attending the meetings of opposition parties and all, but they are in the opposition space. They have taken positions against the BJP. So on this name, opposition could not rally any of these parties. And finally, the last nail on the coffin, as the cliche goes, was the Shiv Sena. Mr. Uddhav Thackeray wanted to avert a split, which eventually happened, but even he was forced to, announce support to the NDA candidate.
He says that even Trinamool Congress's Mamta Banerjee was put on the spot and was surprised at Murmu's nomination because in some districts in West Bengal, there is a significant Santal population.
So even she had to send a message that had the BJP reached out to us, we could have, decided, discussed and all. And then a message was sent to Yashwant Sinha, ki don't come to West Bengal for campaigning. We will ensure that all the votes are polled in your favor. So this was somewhere a lack of political imagination on the part of the opposition. The BJP managed to outsmart them in a game which the BJP would have anyway won.
Plus, he says the other thing that these polls have made clear once again is that parties in the opposition space don't have unity. They are not a united camp.
For instance, the TRS, the Telangana Rashtra Samiti, has never been part of the larger opposition camp. But now there is a sense that the BJP is going aggressive in Telangana. So the TRS has now started attacking the BJP, taking very strong positions, moving closer to the opposition camp. So they have supported the opposition candidate. So it is the interest of these parties in those particular states that is propelling many of them to take decisions. Yashwant Sinha or the Congress or the Trinamool Congress or some of these parties would like to project it as, an ideological battle against the BJP and all. But at some level, it may be an ideological battle for some parties, but for some parties, it's not. They have to take care of their interests. So at the end of the day, there are various interests at play here. Parties will take pragmatic positions. So this opposition unity is largely confined to parliament, where some 15, 16, 17 of these parties come together, protest or raise some particular issue. Outside of parliament, this unity doesn't work in that sense.
These polls have a number of lessons for the opposition parties, especially the Congress. Like one lesson that it has already learnt, that it needs to accommodate other parties when it comes to strategizing.
So it needs to take a backseat and don't just assert that it is the fulcrum of the opposition camp, it is the main opposition party. So decisions should revolve around the Congress and also that is one message the Congress has learned.
Plus the other thing that parties have realized is that they lack a larger message that they want to convey in order to tackle the BJP.
Today, when Congress President Sonia Gandhi was called for questioning by the Enforcement Directorate, some 15-16 parties put out a joint statement in solidarity with her and attacking the BJP government, accusing it of vendetta politics and all. Last month, when Rahul Gandhi was called for questioning, there was no such joint statement or show of solidarity and all. So, at some level, there is an attempt to keep the opposition united on all these issues. So, it is still a work in progress, it seems.
Also, Manoj agrees with Liz that Murmu's win will help the BJP electorally, and that it fits into the larger message that the party wants to send out.
Because Prime Minister Narendra Modi always attacks the other opposition parties, including the Congress and the regional parties, accusing them of, playing dynastic politics and all. So it's a perfect counter in that sense. Like you are promoting dynastic leaders and see what we are doing.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.